all will serve. Your raised dead spell summons an additional skeletal minion, and its cooldown is removed. Bursting Sores. Festering Wounds deal 50% more damage when burst, and all enemies within 8 yards of a burst Festering Wound suffer 90% of attack power as shadow damage. Ebon Fever. Virulent Plague deals the same damage in half the time. Epidemic. Causes each of your virulent plagues within 100 yards to flare up, dealing 150% of attack power as shadow damage to the infected enemy, and an additional 27.5% of attack power as shadow damage to all other enemies near them. Pestilent Pustules. Every 6 Festering Wounds you burst, you gain 1 rune. Blighted Rune Weapon. Your next 4 auto attacks infect your target with 2 Festering Wounds. Unholy Frenzy. When a Festering Wound bursts, you gain 100% of attack speed for 2 seconds. Castigator. Each Festering Strike critical strike applies 2 additional Festering Wounds, and each Scourge Strike critical strike bursts 1 additional Festering Wound. Clawing Shadows. This replaces Scourge Strike. Deals 200% of attack power as shadow damage and causes 1 Festering Wound to burst. Sludge Belcher. Your raised dead now summons an abomination instead of a ghoul, with improved innate abilities. Asphyxiate. Lifts the enemy target off the ground, crushing their throat with dark energy and stunning them for 5 seconds. Debilitating Infestation. Outbreak reduces the movement speed of all affected enemies by 50% for 3 seconds. Spell Eater. Your anti-magic shell is 20% larger and lasts 5 seconds longer. Corpse Shield. For the next 10 seconds, 90% of all damage you take is transferred to your summoned pet, be it Sludge Belcher, Geist or Ghoul. If your summoned pet has been slain while the spell is active, it cannot be resummoned for 30 seconds. Lingering Apparition. You move 30% faster during Wraith Walk, and its cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds. Shadow Infusion. While your Sludge Belcher or Abomination Ghoul is not transformed, Death Coil will also reduce the remaining cooldown of Dark Transformation by 5 seconds. Necrosis. Dealing damage with Death Coil causes your next Scourge Strike to deal 35% increased damage. Infected Claws. Your Sludge Belcher or Ghoul's claw attack has a 35% chance to cause a festering wound on the target. Dark Arbiter. Replaces Summon Gargoyle. You summon a Valkyrie to attack the target for 15 seconds. The Valkyrie will gain 1% increased damage for every 1 runic power you spend. Defile. This one's a big one. Replaces Death and Decay. Defiles the ground targeted by the Death Knight for 10 seconds. Just like an AoE. Every 1 second, if there are any enemies standing in the defile, it deals 39.96% of attack power or 40% Shadow Frost damage to them and grows in radius, and increases your mastery by 200%, stacking up to 10 times. While you remain within defile, your Clawing Shadows and or Scourge Strike will hit all enemies near the target. Soul Reaper. Strike an enemy's soul for 350% shadow damage, afflicting them with Soul Reaper for 5 seconds. Bursting a festering wound on an enemy afflicted by Soul Reaper grants 7% haste for 15 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. The first talent row between All Will Serve, Bursting Swords and Ebon Fever. I got rid of All Will Serve due to it being only single target. Bursting Swords uses 2 runes, and Ebon Fever is the passive of Outbreak, which uses 1 rune. Ebon Fever makes Outbreak deal damage in half the time, which is about 10.5 seconds to 11 seconds. Bursting Swords makes Festering Wounds deal more damage and create a slight AoE. It costs 2 runes, and so we can't get too much consistent damage from this. However, with Ebon Fever, Outbreak can be quite a consistent damage dealer, and with Virulent Plague dealing the same damage in half the time, this is really good for high consistent damage. To the level 57 talent row, we have Pestilent Pustules, Blighted Rune Weapon and Epidemic. Blighted Rune Weapon would be great for a single target talent rotation. So we're going to get rid of that because we're looking at AoE. Pestilent Pustules, every 6 festering wounds you burst, you gain 1 rune. This is going to be great for rune management, however I'm not worried about rune management. Epidemic is the one I'm looking at. Costs 1 rune, has 3 charges, has a 10-second recharge rate, and you can hit people within 100 yards. And if everyone has Outbreak on them, you could deal a ton of AoE damage due to Epidemic having 3 charges and only costing 1 rune each time. So I chose Epidemic for that reason. And on to the level 58 talent row. We have Unholy Frenzy, Castigator, and Clawing Shadows. I was using Unholy Frenzy for a little while, but because I wasn't bursting enough festering wounds due to my talents that I picked up, this wasn't beneficial to me. Castigator, each festering strike, critical strike applies 2 additional festering wounds. Now if you look at the stat template for Unholy DK, they actually don't have a very high crit strike rating, so this talent won't be very useful unless they change how critical strike works, or within the artifact weapons if there are critical strike passives. So this talent won't be very beneficial to us. The Clawing Shadows is the only one that I could see that gave me a slight damage increase. Clawing Shadows replaces Scourge Strike, but it also makes it a pure shadow damage spell, which can be cast up to 30 yards away. Between Scourge Strike and Clawing Shadows, there isn't very much difference between them both. Scourge Strike adds up to, for me currently, 19,190 damage, spread between both physical and magical damage. Whereas Clawing Shadows is straight 20,000 magical damage only. So in total there was only an 893 damage increase by taking Clawing Shadows. However, add in the 30 yard range and we've got a winner here. And for our 60 talent row, we've got Sludge Belcher and Asphyxiate, as well as Debilitating Infestation. Asphyxiate is a good one for 2s, 3s. However, for RBGs, I just want to be as annoying as possible and rot everything down as much as possible, so I want to be using Debilitating Infestation. Sludge Belcher, he's just a utility pet. He's only got an extra death grip on top of the normal pet. He's got the same amount of attack and he can still die really easy. So I'll be taking a Debilitating Infestation. Now with our level 75 talent row, we've got a few options here. We've got Spell Eater, Lingering Apparition, and Corpse Shield. Corpse Shield I would recommend taking if you're going with the Oil Serve talent. Otherwise just be aware that your pet might die really often. Or if you don't mind being without a pet for 30 seconds. I would recommend also making a macro to have Huddle as your pet spell to stop him from taking as much damage while this Corpse Shield is happening. Spell Eater, that would be good if you're up against a whole bunch of spellcasters. Will possibly also be quite good for arenas as well. However, for RBGs and just random battlegrounds as well, I'll be going with Lingering Apparition. Faster Wraith Walk and reduced cooldown, so I can get around faster, I can run away if I need to, or otherwise I can catch people a lot faster as well. The level 90 talents. We're nearly there. Can you hold on to my monotonous voice for a little bit longer? We've got Necrosis, Infected Claws, and Shadow Infusion. The Infected Claws is going to be to do with your pet. The Shadow Infusion is going to be to do with your pet. I'm not really relying on my pet for the battleground. I just want to get as much damage as I can out there, as well as trying to rock things down. So I'm going to go for Necrosis, because it's going to help out my Scourge Strike, i.e. my Clawing Shadows, which I've just finished upgrading in the previous talents. It will make my damage deal a lot more when I'm doing Death Coil, i.e. so when I'm hitting my Death Coil, then I'll deal a lot more damage with my Clawing Shadow or Scourge Strike. And finally the level 100 talent row. The last talents at least until Legion properly comes out. We have a Soul Reaper, Dark Arbiter, and Defile. You can only see Soul Reaper and Dark Arbiter because Defile was a big one and I really need to explain that by itself. So Soul Reaper is going to be amazing for arenas. It will be good for battlegrounds, but it won't be big for spread pressure. If everyone has used Defile before, they will know that Defile is going to be a lot better for spread pressure, especially what it can do now. Dark Arbiter, I just chuck that in the bin. Chuck Dark Arbiter in the bin. It lasts 15 seconds, it's got a 3-minute cooldown, and it doesn't deal as much damage as you might think it does. With that said, let's move over to Defile now. Defile costs only 1 rune. It has a 30-second cooldown. Defiles the ground targeted by the Death Knight for 10 seconds. Every 1 second, if there are any enemies standing in Defile, it deals 40% of your attack power as Shadow Frost damage to them and grows in radius, just like the normal Defile. But it also increases your mastery by 200, stacking up to 10 times. That's new, and that's really big. Also, while you remain in your Defile, your Clawing Shadows or your Scourge Strike will hit all enemies nearby. And nearby, it's about 8 yards, so it's like a very small cleave, but if you've got Clawing Shadows, it cleaves from then. So if your Clawing Shadows at a range, and you're still able to hit them inside the Defile, you're going to be AoEing with Clawing Shadows really, really big. It deals 100% of cleave damage. So for that, I would definitely be taking Defile for Battlegrounds and more than likely RBGs. People will once again fear Defile. I'm Gaviscon and you've been watching my Unholy DK AoE build for patch 7.0. Thanks for watching and I'll see you again soon.